Last year, 405 women at least have been killed as a result of femicide. So obviously femicide being killed because they're female, like because they're a woman.
Hello and welcome to POC Stories. The following video addresses the topic of femicide in Turkey. Disclaimer: this video is not intended to stereotype or vilify Turkey and cannot be used for any discriminatory purposes. Don't forget that femicide affects all countries in the world. This video contains violence content. This may be difficult for some readers. Please engage in self-care after watching it.
So welcome to POC Stories. Today I'm welcoming Mina, and we're going to talk about feminicide in Turkey. So welcome, Mina, and can you introduce yourself?
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is very exciting to be able to talk about something like this. And I love your platform and I think it's very inspiring. So my name's Mina, I'm Turkish. I'm 24 years old. I live in London. But I grew up in Turkey. I grew up in Istanbul until I was around 18, 19, and that's when I moved here. And I did my studies in London and now I'm working in London.
Okay. And how was it for you growing up in Turkey as a woman?
So I actually have been thinking about this a lot since I moved here, because now I'm able to kind of look at it from an outsider's perspective. Obviously, Turkey was evolving a lot throughout my childhood, with the current government coming into place in 2002 when I was 6 years old. So I always had a very secular, liberal, feminist family. Like my immediate family, my parents are very much open with all of that and definitely feminists, but it's always an embedded thing that even as a child, even when you're watching TV in school, it's always there are certain gender roles established and everything kind of serves that agenda. So there's always the male gaze that you feel, and always a certain path that females and males need to follow and that kind of stuff. And when I look back at it, I'm we definitely had a lot of embedded, kind of an anti-feminist agenda that was pushed upon us as children in the things we consumed. But thankfully, my family obviously shielded me from that kind of stuff.
Could you give an example of for what kind of roles, for example, women has to stick with in Turkey?
I actually kind of realized this over lockdown, because the first lockdown last year, because I got into watching some Turkish TV shows because I was homesick, and looking at it from a more educated European perspective, I guess it's very much the man is the breadwinner and the woman is the one that stays at home, and she is the one that has to tolerate his anger, his abuse. And it's just all of these shows just kind of force upon us an established very much patriarchal structure. And obviously they always have been like that. And now I look back at my childhood, and pretty much everything consumed from Turkish TV or media was that kind of a plot, which is definitely very problematic, I'd say.
Was it possible for you to be outspoken regarding feminicide in Turkey?
So I actually didn't do that when I was in Turkey, because the femicides have been getting really, the numbers have been getting much higher in the past couple of years, and I was always here. But over the summer in 2020, I started some social media campaigns, and I actually helped the Challenge Accepted campaign grow on an international scale, me and a couple more social media activists. And I had attended some like pride walks and some protests when I was actually physically in Turkey. But honestly, I must say I didn't really have a positive experience with that because most of them just end with tear gas and police violence. So being able to contribute to it from an international, like internet, digital, social media kind of way was definitely very, very rewarding for me.
Could you explain how did it start, the campaign that was pretty like famous on social media where women were posting black and white photos?
So over the summer, there were so many cases of just women being killed by their ex-partners or sometimes men that they had never even met. It was after a uni student called Pınar Gültekin, who was murdered by her ex-partner. She was missing for, I think, a couple of days, and then her body was discovered and she had been abused and just violently murdered. It was after that one that the challenge started. So basically, women started posting black and white photos of themselves with the hashtag challenge accepted. And that is an homage to, so when someone is killed, usually the next day on social media, there's black and white photos of them circulating, just like people tweeting it, retweeting it, posting it on Instagram as a tribute to them. So the whole point of the challenge was that you post one yourself being like, I could be the next victim. So it's really not, like, it's definitely not a discrimination as to who gets killed, because it could literally be anyone, because the challenger was trying to say that this male violence is pretty much everywhere, in every social class you could think of in Turkey. And also the challenge, as well as criticizing the rising femicides, it was also against the government pulling out of a convention called the Istanbul Convention, because it's a law that protects women and protects family, protects girls against violence. So the posts were also criticizing that.
According to you, what are the main causes of feminicide?
This is definitely a deep one, and I have been thinking about this quite a lot. I would say that it's obviously the toxic masculine culture, but also it's not just the toxic masculinity that of the men that needs to be changed, but also the whole structure that enables this. Because it's not like the structure condemns this in any way. And because it's the same patriarchal culture that I was talking about earlier, that there is no real deterrent for perpetrators. And I was actually reading a feminist scholar called Fatma Gül Berktay, who says that this is a crisis of masculinity. And she says that it's because of the reduced need for men to be the breadwinners that makes them feel displaced. And as a result, they engage in physical, sexual, psychological, economic abuse against their partners and women. And obviously, the way this is handled, the way murders are handled, is definitely not something that other people who might have abusive tendencies look and say, oh, okay, they get actually punished, so I shouldn't engage in this kind of behavior. But also the way that the press handles this. And when I say press, I don't mean just the religious or the government-sided papers. I mean, even the secular liberal papers always report on this with an anti-feminist agenda. And I think this comes back to when I said there's just a whole culture of anti-feminism embedded in us as a society, as the Turkish society. And even when the press isn't calling this out, and that is why I think we just keep seeing all of these new cases coming up every single day.
Do you know how many women have been killed last year?
There's a website called Anıt Sayaç, and it is basically an online memorial for everyone that's killed, and they keep an accurate tally of how many women have been killed as well, because oftentimes government resources report a much lower number to sort of make it seem as if it's not as alarming as it is. But Anıt Sayaç says that last year, 405 women at least have been killed as a result of femicide. So obviously femicide being killed because they're female, like because they're a woman. And this year already we're on the 22nd of January, and 11 women have been killed because of femicides as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so obviously quite an alarming number once again.
And regarding those alarming numbers, is there any step that the government has taken or decided to do? Or
So when you look at it on paper, there obviously, like, there are laws, the police exists, and there are court cases and everything. So when you look at it technically, they exist. But when you look at the application, it is very much not enough. It is absolutely not enough. Because oftentimes, if someone's killed a woman and they dress smartly in court and they act like they're sorry, or like they are regretting it, they get a reduced sentence. Or if they declare that they're religious. So basically, if they put on an act on court, they get reduced sentences, which is obviously, like, a murderer shouldn't be getting a reduced sentence according to what they're wearing. And also, there's law 6284, which is actually one of the laws that we were fighting for over the summer. So it is a law that's made to protect women, children, and family members and victims of stalking, abuse. So basically, it is in place to help women who are fearing for their lives before they get killed. However, even though this is in place, it is often faulty in application and there's shortfalls in its implementation. And it's like, so there's so many cases of women who call the police or contact authorities fearing for their lives and wanting protection, and then they're not taken seriously, and weeks later we hear about their deaths. So all of these point towards the government not doing enough, even though there are regulations in place.
okay, and is this law part of the Convention of Istanbul, or?
Yes, I think this law was put in place around similar times with the convention. So to tell you a bit about the Istanbul Convention, it is a treaty put forward by the Council of Europe, and it's called Istanbul because it was signed in Istanbul in, I think, 2011, but I'm not entirely sure about that, around 10 years ago. And Turkey was the first signatory of it. And it's basically a law in place to protect victims and prosecute offenders. However, once again, law enforcement rarely follows these basic laws. And the government wanted to pull out of it because it had a clause in it saying that everyone should be protected regardless of their gender. And religious and conservative officials thought that this was encouraging, like, LGBT behavior, which honestly, in my and obviously a lot of secular people's opinion, doesn't really make sense, because it was saying that it wants everyone to be protected regardless of their gender. However, once after the campaigning of this summer, the government realized that they can't just pull out of the convention, especially when the name is Istanbul Convention. Like, that would it would be such a bad blow on women's rights in Turkey. So I think they agreed on rephrasing some of the clauses. But even though the convention still exists, it is not enough unless they actually start putting everything on it into actual regulation and helping women in need.
Do you know how is it for feminist organization, how they organize their work regarding women?
So I would say the first one that comes to mind is We Will Stop Femicide's platform. I know that they work on donations, but obviously it is quite hard because probably they don't get enough funding as it is. And because they have to work against an uncooperative government with all of this. And also the government does not really like protests that are against it. So because of these kinds of conditions, they can't just go out and protest and make changes, because people do fear for their lives when they have to go outside and do it, especially in the middle of a pandemic. But the We Will Stop Femicide's platform is very, very good in the sense of they have English resources as well for people all around the world to kind of share and understand what's going on. and they kind of fill in the gaps of where there's information lacking when it comes to women's rights and femicides from the government. So I definitely would say, if anyone listening wants to kind of learn more about it and stay in the loop, I would definitely say check them out.
Do you have anything else to say?
I think it just I know that this is not just a problem in Turkey, but everywhere else. And I feel like us as individuals, for us to make change, it kind of starts in the person. It starts in us. So I feel like incorporating more feminist thought and just changing our behavior on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we are empowering women with all of our actions and giving people voices, just like you are doing right now, which I think is very inspirational. I think that's just key, just listening to each other and actually hearing about other people's experiences. I think that's how we should be as feminists.